A seismic shift has reportedly taken place within the historic halls of Buckingham Palace, where a tense, high-stakes private meeting between Prince William and Prince Edward culminated in an emotional farewell that left the future king visibly shaken. According to accounts detailing the confrontation, Edward reached a private breaking point following discussions regarding the drastic streamlining of his official duties. As William prepares to lead a modernized, restructured monarchy, palace reviews concluded that the workload carried by older senior royals could be significantly reduced. Rather than causing a public scene, airing grievances to the media, or turning his exit into a dramatic spectacle, Edward chose a path of quiet dignity. Yet before stepping away, he reportedly placed a mysterious, sealed document directly into William's hands, a letter entrusted to Edward by the late Queen Elizabeth, kept hidden since her death in 2022. This quiet exit represents far more than a routine administrative reshuffle. It marks a profound generational collision inside an institution navigating unprecedented change. On one side stands Prince William, representing a future-focused monarchy driven by efficiency, tighter budgets, and a streamlined core of working royals. On the other stands Prince Edward, representing a generation that spent decades quietly upholding the crown under Queen Elizabeth's traditional framework. While palace reviews may frame the reduction of Edward's duties as a practical necessity for long-term viability, the emotional weight of his departure underscores the immense human cost when decades of dedicated service intersect with institutional modernization. To fully understand Edward's posture during this transition, one must look at the long trajectory of his public and personal choices. Edward has rarely followed the most obvious or comfortable path expected of a monarch's son. In his youth, he made the difficult decision to leave Royal Marines officer training after completing only part of the course. That choice was met with intense public scrutiny and familial disappointment, particularly given his father Prince Philip's deep, historic ties to the military branch. Rather than defining his life by that early departure, Edward sought an independent identity away from the traditional royal script. Attempting to forge a career in the arts and media, Edward worked with Andrew Lloyd Webber's theatrical organization before establishing his own production company, Ardent Productions, in 1993. The venture brought heavy media focus, with critics constantly questioning whether a prince could genuinely separate private business ambitions from royal privilege. Operating a private enterprise under the intense spotlight of public life proved challenging, especially when every misstep or financial struggle was parsed by international headlines. Yet by 2002, during Queen Elizabeth's Golden Jubilee year, Edward chose to wind down his production business and commit fully to working royal duties. Alongside his wife, Sophie, he built a reputation for steadfast dependability, quietly undertaking thousands of engagements without demanding the center stage. Having spent a lifetime negotiating the precarious boundary between personal conviction and institutional demands, Edward understood early on that altering one's role within the royal family does not shield a person from public scrutiny. His history clarifies why his resistance to William's restructuring plans was not rooted in personal vanity, status, or titles, but in a desire to preserve the dignity of long-term service. He knew firsthand what it meant to adapt to the crown's changing demands, making his quiet exit all the more poignant. For Prince William, the restructuring plan is driven by clear real-world imperatives. Modern public institutions face mounting pressure to demonstrate financial discipline, operational clarity, and contemporary relevance. A lean, focused working monarchy reduces overall taxpayer burden, minimizes potential institutional friction, and establishes a clear division of public responsibility. In an era marked by shifting public attitudes toward hereditary privilege, streamlining the royal footprint is seen by reformers as an essential strategy for survival. Yet executing structural change within a family-led institution introduces deep personal complications. When an individual who has spent decades serving as a dependable working royal is informed that their contribution is no longer central, the line between administrative policy and personal rejection becomes painfully thin. Edward was not an outsider seeking spotlight. He was Queen Elizabeth's youngest son, a quiet constant who helped carry the monarchy through periods of severe family turmoil and media saturation. Telling such a figure that his role has become redundant carries an inevitable emotional price. The dynamic between the two men shifted entirely when Edward presented the sealed envelope. Queen Elizabeth had allegedly entrusted the secret message to her youngest son with a specific mandate: to protect it until the monarchy entered a major period of generational transition. Edward deliberately chose not to hand it over immediately after her passing, believing William needed space to form his own judgment and experience the pressures of leadership before receiving his grandmother's final advice. By waiting for the exact moment of his own exit, Edward ensured the document would be received not as an administrative directive, but as a profound personal reflection. The letter did not serve as a political weapon or a tool of leverage to force William to change his mind. Instead, its contents offered a direct, personal perspective on leadership from Britain's longest-reigning monarch. The late Queen acknowledged that the monarchy must evolve to survive changing eras, but she cautioned against altering the system so rapidly that institutional memory and private trust are destroyed. She reminded her grandson that loyalty is not demonstrated solely through blind compliance, and that a family member can challenge a structural plan while remaining deeply committed to the crown. Most importantly, the text emphasized that modernization must never reduce decades of dedicated public service to a cold line item on an organizational audit. For William, reading those words written in his grandmother's familiar hand transformed an administrative meeting into an overwhelming moment of reflection. It highlighted that Edward's refusal to fight publicly was itself an act of profound loyalty, shielding both William and the institution from another damaging public spectacle. Edward possessed the means to disrupt the transition, yet he chose silence and dignity over personal vindication. The encounter leaves William facing the central dilemma of modern royal leadership: how to reform the crown's outward operations without eroding the internal trust, continuity, and personal relationships that sustain it over time. While the practical reality of a smaller working monarchy may move forward as planned, the interaction forever altered how that transition is felt from within. Prince Edward chose to step aside quietly, leaving behind a clear precedent of quiet sacrifice and delivering one final, indispensable lesson on the true weight of royal duty.